Hi, this is June Stanley. This is my EDL 853 Module 8 case study. Problem identification and analysis. Schuyler Comprehensive School is a small school in a large area where you have a lot of different schools all spread out. I've worked in a school area like this, and it's really difficult. The money's short, the resources are short. There's 16 school districts that share resource services like social workers and psychologists. And moreover, 5 schools share a superintendent, which only visits the school 1 day a week. So what do I know? The SPED teacher, Susan Green, first-year teacher, fresh out of college. She seemed hardworking, motivated, but she's having some difficulties meeting the demands of the school. There's not much supervision. There's not many resources. She commutes an hour each way, and she's taking the place of an experienced and popular SPED teacher. And yet, her first month or so has gone fairly well. The student at issue and his parents, his parents had a divorce, a nasty, nasty divorce 3 months ago. They have joint custody, but it's the mom that's really doing most of the child care. Mrs. Hughes is overwhelmed with the children and her job. She's very bitter towards her husband, and Mr. Hughes doesn't seem to care very much one way or the other. Carl, a third grader, has already been diagnosed with behavior disorder. And yet, since the divorce, he's not only self-abusing, but he's become violent and aggressive towards others as well, particularly his third grade teacher. He's been throwing rocks at teachers, he slams his books, he throws objects across the room, just real nasty and disruptive. So Nancy Taylor, Carl's third grade teacher, initially she told Susan, just follow the old SPED teacher's simple IEP plans. Carl's behavior program seems to be working pretty well. But the 6th week of school, she came in and she told Nancy, take this kid out of my room. He's uncontrollable, and just put him in the resource room all day long. She wasn't interested in talking or IEP meeting, developing a new plan. She just wanted this kid out of her room. So Susan's response, I was impressed with Susan. She calmly questioned Nancy to get more information, and then she invited Nancy to help develop a plan, and she stood her ground, and she did say that the goals and objectives in an IEP can't just be changed without an IEP meeting with the parents. And she also said she didn't really think that putting Carl in a resource room all day was appropriate, but she wanted to work with Nancy. She said she'd work hard on it and get back to Nancy. So she called her district special education coordinator. She developed a framework for an intervention plan. She met with the superintendent, and he okayed that plan. She contacted the parents, and when they finally got back to her, she scheduled an IEP for Friday of that week. So during the IEP, Mrs. Hughes was obviously distraught. She's overwhelmed with her job and the kids, and she doesn't know what to do with Carl. Mrs. Taylor once again reiterated that she just wanted Carl out of her room. She couched it in more PC language, of course. Both parents signed the papers for the new plan that Susan had developed. Mr. Hughes, apparently because he just wanted to get out of the room, and Mrs. Hughes because she doesn't know what else to do. Must have been very emotional and distressing. So after the IEP meeting, Nancy Taylor once again said that the old SPED teacher would have just pulled the kid, stuck him in detention with a workbook. She would have just gotten the kid out of her room. And she seemed pretty disgusted with the whole affair. Whereas Susan continued to really think about how to help Carl. She really didn't seem to think that you can just put him in a resource room. She didn't think that he needed that she thought he could be successful in a general ed classroom with some help. So what do I need to know? What kind of resources are available for Carl, for mom, for the family, and what's going on with the siblings? What resources are they getting? What services are they getting? How are they responding to those? How are they dealing with the divorce? And how can we help Carl to open up? He won't answer questions about his behavior. And then are there other SPED teachers that have dealt with similar problems and similar issues? What have they done? And also, to me, a key thing is that Nancy doesn't seem to want to work with Susan to keep Carl in the classroom. So what can I do to support Susan in this, and what can I do to motivate Nancy? And finally, I need to be knowledgeable about any legal issues that might be involved. So the problem, Carl needs help. It's a third grade student. Parents went through a horrible divorce, and he's acting out. He really needs some help. And teachers must understand that it's their responsibility, as well as Susan's, to help keep these SPED kids in their classroom. So my steps to resolve the problem: look into resources for Carl and his family. Look into Carl's siblings. How are they coping? Get Carl to open up. Find out how other SPED teachers have dealt with similar problems. Support Susie and Nancy, and look into the legal issues. So strategies to implement the plan for each step. Resources. We have a district coordinator of special education. I could talk to the state head of special education. I could look into national, state, and local organizations and government departments for services and support. Step 2, what's going on with Carl's siblings? I need to talk to the SPED staff at the junior high, see what kind of resources they're using and how they're responding, and meet with Susan and Nancy and Carl and his mother and his siblings to kind of get some more input and brainstorm some ways of coping. Step 3, one of the first steps to helping Carl, have a psychologist talk to him multiple times. Get him to open up a little bit and find out what's going on with him. And then he needs to also meet with Susan and with Nancy as well, because Nancy's the teacher that he's specifically targeting. And I could also have paraprofessionals support him throughout the day, check on him, see how he's doing. Step 4, all these different SPED teachers, statewide, district-wide, statewide, nationally, there must be many that have had similar problems. And so I need to research this, hunt them down, and see what worked for them. So Nancy, I need to meet with Nancy and instruct her that she is expected to include Carl in her classroom. And also tell her that I'll support her. She's expressed fear of Carl, and I think it's a reasonable fear. So she needs to know that if she's going to take on the challenge of Carl, that Susan and I are going to be behind her to support her. And then any legal issues, I just need to research these, make sure we're crossing our T's and dotting our I's, make sure that we're strictly following Carl's IEP. So resolving the issues. Data from the case, the facts in the case show that Carl and his family are really in distress. His mother is just overwhelmed. Carl's behavior gets worse and worse, and he doesn't seem able to discuss his problems. And so what's the best outcome for all the students in dealing with Carl and his family? My plan will ensure that Carl is helped to understand his struggles and how to control his behavior, how to deal with these feelings without being aggressive. And so for all the students, this means that Mrs. Taylor's classroom will be a safe, quiet place for the children to learn. More examples of the data, referring to Susan. She's a first-year teacher. Her position is really challenging. She has very few resources, very little support, a huge workload, and yet she really wants to do what's best for Carl and all her students and all of the school students. So in dealing with this, what's the best for all the students? I need to support Susan and give her all the guidance that she needs to serve Carl and all her students. And in doing so, this ensures that my school has a strong SPED department, and it's supported by administration and the teachers, and that those SPED students are maximally integrated into the general ed classrooms and are as successful as they can be. More data, as referring to Nancy, she wanted Susan to remove Carl from her classroom immediately, and even when Susan did not do this, she continued to insist that he be removed. And even after the IP, she still wanted Carl removed. And so this behavior, this is not going to be allowed in my school. She has to follow our plans for inclusion for SPED students. And yet she needs my support because she's actually a little afraid of this kid, and he's a horrible disruption in her classroom. So what is best for all students? I'll tell Nancy where I stand on it, and I'll give her the support she needs. And so then all the teachers in the school will know that they're expected to work with the SPED students and that I will give them the support that they need. So what was I thinking and feeling and valuing through all this? As a new administrator, I was wondering if I was actually going to be able to resolve the problem. And so I was asking, how can I resolve it in the way that's best for all the students? And how can I approach Carl in the best way to help him? How can I make sure my teachers implement inclusiveness? And how can I support Susan and the SPED department? And the feelings, poor Mrs. Hughes and Mr. Hughes, I just puzzled at his attitude. Terribly worried about Carl and a little worried that I wouldn't do a good job in resolving. This is a kind of a tough issue. So, but all the time, my values, the primary value is the students in the school, all the students. And then Carl and his family, helping Carl is going to help everyone in the school and all the SPED students as well. I really value the special education department and particularly a good SPED teacher such as Susan. These small rural schools with little money and resources, it's so hard to get good teachers, and it's hard to get good SPED teachers, any SPED teachers, in any school. And I also value a veteran third grade teacher like Mrs. Taylor and really don't want to lose her. And finally, the climate and our culture of our school is so important, and it's just issues like this that help to form those two things. There's some things that I also need to do. I need a training program for teachers and staff on inclusion. I need to investigate more support for families like Carl's, and I need to have Susan establish a way for teachers to give her a little heads up on potential issues on, at the very minimum, a weekly basis. Instead of letting things go for 5 weeks, we need to nip issues like this in the bud. Evidence of promoting academic success. My plan would modify Carl's behavior, and so that Ms. Taylor's classroom would be a quiet, safe place to learn, and students could excel. The personal well-being, my plan would promote a climate of respect and kindness as well as academic rigor. And so this would benefit not only Carl, but every student in the school. And as far as enhancing instructional capacity, it's so hard for a teacher to be effective when you have a student in the classroom who's terribly disruptive and that you may even fear. And so my plan to help Carl would ensure that he gets the help to control his behavior. And then this would allow Ms. Taylor instructional capacity to increase, and it will help all of her students to succeed. Thank you for watching.